They fired me with a smile like they were slicing a ribbon at a grand opening. Clean, cheerful, and pretending the scissors weren't sharp. My name is Randall Randy Pike. I'm 47 years old, and for 15 of those years I'd carried the client relations heartbeat of Larkspur Bioworks like a metronome in my pocket. At 9:12 on a windy Tuesday, 3 days before our largest pitch of the year, the new operations director said 2 words into the quiet room, effective immediately, and the air left the conference table as if someone had punched it. I didn't argue. I didn't ask for reconsideration. I didn't ask why the person who'd never logged into our lab information system thought she knew what our clients needed better than the man who'd stood in their clean rooms with them at midnight. I just nodded, slid my chair back without scraping the floor, and said, "I hope your Friday presentation lands." Someone coughed. A pen clicked twice and stopped. Sloan Avery, 32, sharp suit, sharper chin, MBA from somewhere that liked glass atriums and case competitions, tilted her head as though I'd spoken in a dialect she hadn't yet optimized. She blinked once, twice, real slow, then said, "What do you mean by that, Randy?" "You'll figure it out," I said, and I meant it. I stood up. The room of faces, faces I'd hired one by one over a decade and a half, faces I'd trained, defended, evaluated, and celebrated, looked at their notebooks like they were memorial programs. I walked down the hallway that still smelled faintly of ethanol and new carpet, past the framed patent plaques no one dusted anymore, into the office with my name mistaken on the door placard because no one had cared to fix it after facilities swapped the plate. I opened the top drawer and pulled out 2 cardboard boxes I'd tucked there 3 weeks earlier. Not because I'm a pessimist, because in this line of work you learn to keep your parachute folded and handy. I packed slowly, not because I wanted to drag it out, but because endings asked to be done right. A picture of my daughter Kayla at 9, beaming gap-toothed, holding a science fair ribbon she won with a gelatin cell model we made together one Sunday with gumdrops and licorice. The first plaque I ever got, Client Retention Award, Year 7, heavy as a brick and twice as ugly. The chipped mug that says World's Okayest Dad, the one Kayla gave me because okayest made us both laugh. I slid a plant saucer into the corner and left the plant. Plants know how to keep breathing wherever they're rooted. I took my notebooks, 6 blue, 1 black, spines worn to suede, each with a date on the cover, each filled with the kind of ink that never reminded you it was there until you needed it more than food. The doorway caught a shadow. Sloan leaned there with her blazer buttoned even though the office ran warm. "Randy," she said, and she tried to attach empathy to my name, but the staple didn't hold. "About Axiom Helix on Friday." "Not my problem," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't hurl anything. I taped the first box, creased the flap like I'd done this before. "Good luck." "Seriously." The hinge in her jaw twitched. She left. She'll always leave when the room doesn't bend. My team came by in 1s and 2s. They had Monday faces on a Tuesday. Anderson shook my hand with both of his like he could transmit apology by heat. Mo said he'd learned more from me in a year than he had in college, and I told him the secret was always remembering which questions matter. Beth stood there longer than the rest. Beth with her hair finding pencils, with her binder clips sorted by size in a mug that said IT depends. She swallowed, then whispered, "This is wrong." "It's business," I told her, because that's what she needed to hear in that moment. The cold compress phrase we both knew would dull the sting for exactly 6 minutes. But we both knew it wasn't business. Not really. Business is messy sometimes. Yes, but not sloppy. This was sloppy. This was a person who didn't know which valves fed the line, throwing her hand at the big red one, because red looks like power. I lifted the boxes, one under each arm like dumbbells, and walked out the way people leave churches, not looking side to side, only forward, keeping dignity clasped like a book you're not done with yet. The security guard, Manny, stood up when he saw me. "You good?" he asked. "Always," I said. "Tell your grandson happy birthday." He grinned and said he'd do it. He will. Manny doesn't forget things that matter. The truck started the way good trucks do. I sat there a minute with my hands on the wheel, and the building reflected in my windshield like a cake I'd baked for 15 years that someone else was about to smash with a palm. The funny thing is, everything already looked smaller through glass. At home, the kettle hissed. Helen, my wife of 22 years, the woman who can read me the way an X-ray reads bone, had 2 mugs waiting and an eyebrow raised. How bad? She asked. Could be worse, I said, and I meant that too. Bad is a phone call from an emergency room. Bad is a doctor saying, I wish I had different news. This was a woman in a navy suit who thought a footer was the same thing as a signature telling me she wanted my chair empty by lunch. We sat. We didn't turn on the TV or pretend we needed sound. We drank coffee the way you drink it on a porch in storm weather, aware of the wind, aware of the roof, aware that roofs are a promise you made to yourself a long time ago, and then kept with sweat and tar and a hammer that never once asked for a thank you. What are you going to do? She asked finally. Sleep tonight, I said. And then tomorrow? Let the consequences do what they do. How'd it happen? She asked, and so I told her, not because she didn't already know most of it from the shape of my evenings, but because I needed to hear the story with the window open, with the smell of cinnamon and coffee and the dog at my feet making the kind of warm you don't get at work. I started at Larkspur Bioworks when the founder still wore the same jacket 3 days a week, and the autoclave was more a suggestion than a schedule. I was 24 with a secondhand briefcase and the kind of hunger that makes you walk fast in hallways. Back then, the company had 2 floors, 1 fridge, and 3 big problems. We didn't know who we were. We didn't know how to tell anyone what we did, and the lab sink was always full. The founder, old Mr. Moreland, saw me clean the sink one night without being asked and said, "You keep doing that, son, and we'll keep finding you work." He gave me a chance, and I kept giving him results. I learned everything I could lay my hands on. I learned what a compliance officer cares about, paper trails and real trails that match, what a principal investigator loses sleep over, timelines and trust, and how to read a room without looking like you were. I figured out which clients wanted white glove and which wanted rolled up sleeves. By 30, I ran the client relations group. By 35, I could walk into a machine shop in Houston or a boardroom in Boston and say, "Here's how we make your science safer and stronger." And people would believe me because I made it true. We got through the lean years because we took care of our people and because our clients took my calls on Sundays. We won contracts against firms with marble lobbies because I remembered that the Axiom Helix CTO hates slides with animations and that the procurement lead at Solera Diagnostics won't sign anything if the third bullet has a comma splice. You don't learn those things in case studies. You learn them in hotel bars at 10 p.m. when someone puts a napkin over their badge and tells you what they really think. Then Mr. Moreland retired, as founders eventually do, and his son-in-law took the chair. Elliot Marlowe. Elliot of the notepad full of MBA words and the calendar full of off-sites that were just meetings in rooms with better snacks. He brought in consultants who showed us pie charts and told us what colors meant loyalty. He said words like right sizing, with the warm smile of a flight attendant telling you the exit row is free if you can lift 40 pounds. 3 months ago, Elliot hired Sloan Avery. She's going to modernize operations, he said. Fresh eyes. The eyes were fresh. They hadn't seen a lab before. Sloan rearranged our process flow diagrams like she was dealing cards she didn't know the names of. She booked time with clients under the banner of listening sessions, then interrupted their answers to tell them what mattered. She reorganized my filing system into one that looked pretty and took twice as long to use. She sent me a calendar invite to align on performance expectations, and when I showed up with numbers, she showed up with adjectives. The first time I knew she was aiming to remove me rather than improve me, I walked in early and heard her on speaker with someone from corporate. Randall's methods are legacy, she said, stretching the word like gum. Respected, sure, but we're in a new era. I can deliver the same client results with half the overhead. Half the overhead had names. Beth, Anderson, Mo. People whose kids I knew and whose birthdays I remembered because I wrote them in the margins of my blue notebooks. I didn't confront her. I'm not a martyr, and I'm not a hothead. I'm the guy you call when the deal is wobbling and you need it steady. I kept building the pitch for Axiom Helix. $30 million in specialized biosensor hardware and integration, 8 months of relationships and yes, and notes on napkins. I mapped their airflow design with such precision, their lead engineer asked for a copy for training. I designed a calibration protocol that accounted for the drift Axiom had never been able to tame during scale-up. I promised their CTO that on Friday we'd walk through not a presentation, but a plan, and that by the time we reached slide 9, there wouldn't be a question left that mattered. Sloan knew the date, not the details. In her mind, a pitch is a sequence of fonts. In mine, it's a conversation with a heartbeat and a clock. When she fired me in front of my team, she didn't just clear a chair. She erased context, thousands of hours of preference, nuance, grudges, shortcuts, trust deposits. She didn't just remove the mouth that says the words. She removed the hands that know where the breaker is when the lights go. That night, I tried to sleep, but anticipation moves furniture in your chest. At 2:03 a.m., I made tea and sat at the kitchen table. Helen patted in and sat with me. We didn't fill the silence with couch-throw words. She put her hand over mine and said, "You're building something in your head. I can hear the studs going up." "I'm thinking," I admitted. "And I'm listening." "To what?" "To what happens when people choose shortcuts." I looked at my phone. 3 voicemails from Sloan. The last one, the voice trying for calm, asking about whether I'd wrapped the Axiom deliverables. I didn't respond. I'm not her employee anymore. That fact rang like a ClearBell note. I opened my laptop. I didn't write a resignation letter. She'd done that for me. I wrote emails instead, to people who'd asked for coffee over the last 2 years, and to people who'd said, "If you ever think about a change, call me first." I updated my resume, not with brag lists, but with results, retention rates, cycle time reductions, dollars saved, launches salvaged. At 5:41 a.m., a reply landed from Blue Meridian Labs. "If you're available today, we'd like to speak at noon." At 6:02, another from Cobalt Atlas. "Could you do a call at 2? At 6:17, an actual offer from Harbor and Linden, subject line, "Let's make this simple." At 6:45, I changed my shirt. Helen raised that eyebrow again. "Going somewhere?" "There's a table at Finch Street Coffee with a plug near the window," I said. "I'm going to sit there and let the day come to me." "Give them hell," she said. "I won't have to," I said. "They're walking into theirs." At 9:47, my phone lit up for the 4th time with Sloan's name. I let it buzz. At 9:58, Beth texted, "Are you busy? Axiom is here." Sloan looks like someone unplugged her. I typed back, "Wish them a good morning for me." At 10:07, Beth again, "They're asking for you by name." The CTO made a joke about the blue notebooks. At 10:09, "Where are the final calibration notes?" Sloan can't find them in the server. I sipped my coffee. The calibration notes were written, all right, in the blue notebook with a tea stain on the cover, pages full of little penciled stars at the places they'd argued with me, and I'd talked them through it. "The system has what it has," I sent back, which was true. The server had contracts, baseline specs, the corporate templates that bark but don't fetch. The nuance lived where nuance always lives, in the hand that wrote it and the head that remembers where the words came from. At 10:23, Beth called. "She's saying you hid information," Beth whispered, the low, urgent voice of someone ducking in an office with glass walls. "She's saying you sabotaged the shared drive." "Did I hide anything?" I asked. "No," Beth said, immediate. "No." She refused training. "Remember? You did the Saturday session with the binders, and she never showed. She said she prefers to develop new approaches." "That's an approach," I said. At 10:31, my phone flashed with Elliot's name. I picked up. There are moments when it's important to listen to someone discover what a cliff looks like up close. "Randy," he said in a voice that wanted to be folksy. "Somehow there's been a misunderstanding." "No," I said. "There hasn't. We're a team here," he said, and the word team sounded like a sticker he'd put on the front of a binder. "If you could come in for the Axiom discussion, we'd compensate you." "I'm not on your payroll," I said. "I can't represent you without a contract, and even then I'd be representing a client, not a company." "Friday was your choice. Choices have invoices." "How much to consult?" he asked abruptly. "I'm not available," I said, and I wasn't. At noon I was talking to Blue Meridian. At 2 I was talking to Cobalt Atlas. At 4 I had a Zoom with a venture-backed outfit that had never heard of Larkspur until yesterday. By 11:19, Beth texted. They gave her 20 minutes to produce the calibration documentation. She tried to wing it with bullet points. At 11:27, "They're leaving." The CTO shook her hand and said he hoped I was doing well. At 11:31, "She's saying you took company property. She's calling security." Security called at 11:38 because good people still do what their badge says. "Mr. Pike," the guy said, polite as lamplight, "Ms. Avery is asking about notebooks." "My personal notebooks," I said. "Bought at Heller Stationery with a debit card, pages filled on my time and at my discretion." All official files are on the server. If Ms. Avery can't find what she needs, she may need to learn what she needs. There was a pause long enough to hide a smile in. Understood, he said, and we both hung up with our dignity intact. At noon, Blue Meridian's VP of Business Development, a woman named Patricia Holloway who wore her intelligence like a well-fitted coat, asked me to tell her about a time a client was halfway out the door and I brought them back. I told her about the winter we saved Valiant Diagnostics by redesigning their onboarding to route around a custom snarl, and how I caught the problem not because of a KPI, but because the receptionist told me the delivery guy looked more tired than usual. Patricia leaned back and said, "You understand that science is human. At 12:28, she said, we'd like to make you an offer." At 12:32, before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. It was Tom, who ran our Asia-Pacific relationships, but really ran on loyalty. "Randy," he said, "I should have told you sooner." "Tell me now," I said. "She's been calling international clients asking for originals of email chains. Said it was quality review. When I told her everything was in the CRM, she pushed. She wanted my folders. She wanted my personal notes. She kept asking for renewal dates and pricing structures like she was trying to catch you hiding something. She was building a narrative," I said, feeling a kind of calm that isn't quiet so much as sterile. "Yesterday, after Axiom, she told the team you deliberately withheld critical information," Tom said. "Beth stood up in the meeting and said he tried to hand it to you. You wouldn't take it. It got tense." "How's the mood?" I asked. "Like a power went out," he said. "People are whispering. Tell the good ones to keep their resumes polished," I said, and Tom said, "Already did." By 2, Cobalt Atlas had joined the courtship. By 3, Blue Meridian had sent a formal offer. Senior Director of Client Partnerships, 25% bump, full benefits, equity that tasted like possibility. By 4, Axiom Helix had posted a procurement update. "Due to internal changes at our vendor, we are reopening bids." At 4:11, an email from Axiom's CTO hit my inbox. "If you're planning next steps, call me." At 6:02, Kayla FaceTimed me from her dorm room. "Mom says you're home," she said. "Are you okay?" She's 19 and learning to be punchline-proof in a world that laughs at the wrong time. "I'm better than okay," I said. "I'm new." She smiled. "You look taller," she said. "Also, your hair is doing that thing." "My hair is always doing that thing," I said. Thursday morning, Patricia called again. "If you're willing, we'd like to announce you Monday," she said. "We're building a pharmaceutical consulting wing. We think you're the person to build it." "Who would I have?" I asked. "Whoever you need," she said, "and you know sincerity when it doesn't wobble." I thought of Beth's pencil finding her hair like a magnet. I thought of Tom's voice that could make a stone hand you a pen. I thought of Mo's habit of catching small things before they became big. "You'll have my answer by noon," I said. At 9:14, the Kansas City Business Journal posted a piece. Anonymous sources, but anonymity doesn't hide style. "Key client walks from Larkspur Bioworks after leadership shakeup," it read. The first line said, "Trust is slow to build, fast to burn." The second said, "A torch helps." They quoted someone familiar with the meeting who said that the vendor's new operations director was unable to produce expected documentation. The third paragraph referenced blue notebooks, and I almost spit coffee. At 9:41, Sloan updated her LinkedIn with a pastel graphic about embracing transformation. The comments below were a museum of tone deafness. At 9:56, 3 of my longtime clients commented, "Where did Randy go?" At 10:11, a fourth wrote, "Following, which is corporate for we'll follow him." At 11:03, Elliot emailed to say there had been unfortunate miscommunications and that Larkspur wished me every success. The signature block had 3 logos I'd negotiated. I closed the email without answering. I deleted it the way you pull a sticker off a window, slow enough not to leave residue. By noon, I said yes to Blue Meridian. At 2:10, Axiom CTO called. "We've watched you move," she said. "We're prepared to talk if you are." At 2:27 we talked, about where her pain was, about what Blue Meridian looked like inside, about how we'd avoid the politics that had just eaten our lunch at Larkspur, about how there's no non-compete that can stand up if it tries to stop a client from choosing competence. By 3:02, we had terms to paper. By 5:18, Blue Meridian's general counsel had emailed me, "Welcome. and attached more PDFs than a mortgage. Friday, I cleaned my garage. Not because it needed it, because muscles like reasons. I sorted wrenches by size and memory. Helen came out with lemonade and said, "You're making the corners nice." She always knows what to say that sounds like it's about screws and really isn't. Monday, I walked into Blue Meridian's lobby and they made it clear, with eye contact, with quiet efficiency, with fresh badge plastic that didn't pinch, that they knew what they'd hired. I spent the morning meeting the people who'd be my people. No one flexed. No one performed. Everyone asked the right questions. At lunch, Patricia slid a folder across the table. "We're ready if you want to bring folks," she said. "We won't poach. We'll invite." "Invite 3, I said. Beth for regulatory logic and client psychology. Tom for international relationship glue. Mo for the way he sees problems before they sprout stems. "Send the emails," Patricia said, and I closed my eyes briefly because the thing about doors is they swing both ways, and sometimes you get to hold them. By Wednesday, Beth had sent a message that said, "When do I start?" By Thursday, Tom had 3 offers from 3 companies and accepted ours because, in his words, "You don't leave your quarterback." By Friday, Mo walked into our offices in a shirt his mom picked out and a tie he tied 3 times before it sat right. We built something all over again, only faster, because the second time you know where the rocks are in the river. We built without banners or change management posters. We built with daily stand-ups that had chairs because dignity wears Saul's out too. We built with a whiteboard that said, in big ink, "Who did we help today?" And underneath, "How do we know?" Our first quarter scorched every forecast. Axiom signed. Then their subsidiary called. Then their competitor called because competitors don't like losing face or contracts. The pharmaceutical consulting wing Beth ran got submissions through IRB faster than anyone believed possible because she trained the scientists to write for the people who read, not the people who wrote. Tom turned 3 polite introductions in Osaka into a pipeline that kept our operations team smiling tired smiles. Mo shaved 2 weeks off a validation process by noticing that a vendor's tolerance spec looked good on paper and terrible on a Friday at 4. At night, I went home and told Helen the stories without the acronyms. Kayla called on Thursdays and asked, "Do you like this you better?" I didn't lie. "I do," I said. "I like the me that doesn't grind his teeth when a meeting invite lands." 2 months in, my calendar pinged with a coffee request from a name I knew. Elliot. He wanted to meet at Finch Street. I went, not to gloat, but because sometimes the kindest thing you can do is tell someone the truth without dressing it in anything. He arrived 10 minutes early and looked 10 years older than when I last saw him. He stirred his coffee until it went cold. "I misjudged," he said finally, no preamble. "I thought process could replace people. I thought polish could replace history. We lost Axiom. We lost Selene Therapeutics. We laid off 15. He stopped. "Would you consider coming back? We'll make it right. VP of Ops. A free hand. Name your number." "It's not about the number," I said. "What's it about?" he asked, and that's when I believed he might actually want to know. "It's about trust," I said. "You taught everyone to believe that relationships are optional, that experience is replaceable, that you can pull a pillar and the roof will balance because you like the idea of how it looks without the pillar. You can rebuild, Elliot. You should, but it won't be with me. I'm building somewhere else now, and I like who I am there." He nodded. He looked like a man who knew the map was wrong and the gaslight was on. "If you change your mind," he said. "I won't," I said kindly. The next week, Larkspur announced a strategic review. That's how companies say we're hurting in press releases. 3 weeks later, Sloan updated her profile to something in Denver with a title that sounded like a conference breakout session. Her post included a picture of her smiling with her arms folded at a 45-degree angle. The comments said, "Congratulations," and "So proud of you," and "Change is hard but worth it." No one from Axiom liked it. We kept building. We hired carefully. I told everyone who joined us, "You're not here to be smart in a vacuum. You're here to make other people's work go better." We wrote client guides that looked like cookbooks with sticky notes. We celebrated small wins in big voices and big wins in quiet gratitude. We made mistakes, of course. We're human, not software, but we owned them in under an hour and fixed them in under a day. We ran a post-mortem after every no and learned not to be precious about our own brilliance. 3 months to the day from my coffee with Elliot, the Kansas City Business Journal ran a front-page story, Blue Meridian names Randall Pike Senior Vice President of Strategic Development after unprecedented growth. The article mentioned Axiom. It mentioned numbers people care about and numbers that mean very little if you've never stayed late to hold a client's panic in your hands and tell it to breathe. The reporter asked for a quote. I said what I always say when people stick a mic under my chin. The work matters. The people matter more. If you take care of one, you get the other. That night Kayla called, buzzing with the kind of glee that makes screens brighter. Dad, she said, my business professor told your story in class. She called it the Larkspur lesson. She said, don't treat institutional knowledge like office furniture. She said, this is wild. The new director pulled a Jenga brick and then asked why the tower shook. What did you say? I asked. I said my dad always told me the best revenge is living well, and also working with people who don't need revenge to do good work. I sat on the back steps after the call and watched a pair of neighbor kids ride bikes until the sky turned the soft color that means dinner. The old me would have been in the car then, or on a plane, or staring at a spreadsheet and thinking my value was in the number of times my phone chimed. The new me listened to crickets and thought, success sounds like this. 6 months after Sloan's effective immediately, Blue Meridian announced the acquisition of 3 smaller consulting units and stitched them into what we'd built, careful to keep their best people and repurpose the ones who'd been used to being told no more than how. Beth ran onboarding like a conductor, and everyone who came through shook her hand and said they'd never been treated like grown-ups on day one. Tom opened a tiny office in Hong Kong with a view of the harbor and sent us pictures of the skyline at dawn, all glass and future. Mo patented a small change to a sensor cradle that cut failure rates by 1/3, and we threw him a party with a cake shaped like a bracket because sometimes a joke makes a feeling stick. We saw Larkspur in the news one more time. The board replaced Elliot with someone who spoke in softer words and promised to rebuild trust. I believe people can change. I also believe companies are ships that remember who captained them when they were steered into rocks. Here's the part nobody mentions when they say the phrase, moving on. Moving on isn't a sprint away from something bad. It's a walk toward something built. It's mornings when your shoulders aren't braced. It's opening your notebook and writing down not just what a client said, but who they were when they said it. It's looking around a room and recognizing that every person there has a key you don't have and getting excited to find the door it opens. One afternoon in late autumn, Sloan sent me a message. It was short. It said, I was wrong. I stared at it for a long minute. I thought about the day she fired me. I thought about the faces at my table, about the plan I'd left because plants know things. I thought about how hard it is to type those 3 words. I didn't respond with glee. I didn't respond at all. Some conversations end when they should. A week later, I drove across town to Kayla's campus to take her for pho. She sat across from me and told me about a lab partner who never answered emails and about a professor who remembered her name and about a roommate who collected antique typewriters that don't type. She said, you seem different, Dad. Not just happier. More you. I got to build again, I told her. Turns out I missed it. On the way back to her dorm, she slipped her arm through mine the way she did when she was 9. So, she said, if someone shows you who they are, believe them, I said. And if someone shows you they're capable of better, build with them, I said. When I got home, I went to the garage and opened a fresh blue notebook. I wrote the date on the cover and a sentence on the first page. Remember who you are when no one is watching. Then, below it, another, remember who you are when everyone is. Sometimes the best revenge is refusing to spend a single extra minute in rooms that don't know the difference between a person and a process. Sometimes the best revenge is a team that laughs in hallways and ships work on time and loses sleep only over good ideas. Sometimes the best revenge is walking out, not to hurt someone behind you, but to make space for the person in front of you to finally breathe. On a clear Friday morning in the new year, I found myself back at Finch Street Coffee, not because I needed coffee, but because the sun hits the window just right and makes the dust look like it's auditioning for magic. A woman in a lab coat sat at the next table, flipping through a stack of papers. I watched her mouth move as she read. She caught me looking and smiled, that smile you get when you're thinking of 2 things at once. Presentation? I asked. Budget meeting, she said, rolling her eyes. I'm a scientist. Numbers are fine. Numbers with opinions are rude. I laughed. May your numbers mind their manners. She nodded. You work here? She asked. Not for the coffee shop, I said. For the city, in a way. What do you do? I make sure people get to do the thing they're best at, I said. And I stop rooms from forgetting what they're for. She looked back at her pages with lighter shoulders. I finished my coffee, left a good tip, and stepped outside into air that smelled like there might be rain, but probably not. Somewhere downtown, a meeting had started without me. Somewhere else, a deal got saved because someone remembered that the procurement officer hates comma splices. Somewhere, Sloan sat in a new glass office and, maybe, had learned the difference between playing at power and holding responsibility. I drove home with the window down and my tie loosened. When I got there, Helen was out front cutting the deadheads off the daisies because she says if you take away what's finished, the plant will keep blooming. She looked up and said, "How's the world?" Loud, I said, "But it listens if you speak plain." She kissed my cheek. The dog leaned into my thigh like he'd missed me for 3 years instead of 3 hours. I went inside and opened the blue notebook again. I drew a little star next to the sentence about rooms. Then I wrote another line. One for the next time someone with a glossy smile thinks effective immediately is the same as final. Consequences don't need help. They have legs. I put the notebook away, washed my hands, and started dinner. That's the work, too, really. Feeding the people who feed you back. Building so well that one day no one has to remember what was broken because all they see is what holds.